Hey, hi everyone. We're here today to talk about crypto and the big changes that are happening in the market and the technology and the trading and so on and so forth. My name is Nick Shindo. I head up KX in Japan. Japan is obviously a very large, makes up a very large part of the global crypto markets. And I have the pleasure today to have Jad Sarmo, Head of Quantitative Development at BTC2, one of the world's leading institutional liquidity providers in crypto. And today's session, we'll be investigating some of the big changes in the crypto market, what that means for a lot of the players, how the market is maturing and getting more sophisticated and advanced. Everything from the underlying infrastructure, market structure, microstructure to the macro levels. So without further ado, I will pass over to Jad, who many of you may know already, to kindly introduce himself. Jad.
Thanks, Nick. Great to be here. As you mentioned, B2C2 are the global leader in the institutional trading of digital assets. So we serve institutions like retail broker, exchanges, banks, and fund managers. So I joined B2C2 in 2021. Very exciting time for crypto. Before that, I spent 15 years in FX algorithmic trading. So today I run the quantitative development team at B2C2. So my team designs, build the models and infrastructure that powers our pricing and trading systems. We work closely with researchers and traders and tech, of course, and the aim is to provide reliable pricing to our clients and most crypto exchanges in all market conditions.
Excellent. So as mentioned at the top, there's been a lot of changes, a lot of market volatility, a lot of surges in the volume of data to really create, I would argue, a transformational moment for this market. It's matured a lot. It's a lot more institutional participation, as Jad just mentioned. And there are huge demands placed on the big players like BTC2 in the crypto market, given all of these changes and what that means for technology. B2C2 is also a valued customer of KDB. So we're looking at, or KX solutions, I should say, including KDB. So we'll be certainly looking into some of the ways that BTC2 is leveraging KX software today. I guess to set the scene, maybe Jad, if you could give us a kind of feel for what's going on in the digital asset space today.
Absolutely. As you mentioned, institutional adoption is real. It's accelerating. The approval of BlackRock's BTC ETF last year in the US, that was a tipping point. And then regulatory clarity is improving, like we see MiCA in Europe. We see pro-crypto voices in the US. That's pretty obvious today. The M&A activity is heating up. We just saw Coinbase buying Deribit for $2.9 billion. Bitcoin just above 110K as a couple of days ago. Stable coins at 150 billion market cap. So there's also a real market, macro impact. So for example, I don't know if many people know that, but Tether is among the top 10 holders of US Treasury. So it's like the economy is really connected.
I mean, just to expand on what you're talking about there, Jad, I think for a lot of, let's say, the average person in the street, crypto is still pretty niche or mysterious or somehow an untrustworthy marketplace. Or in contrast, there is a lot more retail as well as institutional, but retail participation in the market through vehicles such as ETFs, exchange traded funds. And then there's also been some huge problems, let's say, with the explosion of FTX. Japan recently here was a big hack at DMM, and that exchange no longer exists. It's been bought by SBI, and there are regular quote unquote scandals in the crypto space. But Jad, from your point of view, do you still consider crypto to be niche, or what are the key other trends that you see?
Not anymore. Bitcoin alone has a $2 trillion market cap. It's too large to ignore. Institutional players demand transparency, best execution, and robust infrastructure. So we're in a different place than we were even 4 or 5 years ago. the space has become much more professional. So we see more and more specialists from traditional finance, from the top tier banks and hedge funds, moving to crypto. They know the good practice; they've done it before. That includes trading system, risk management, etc. So they're moving to crypto to to rebuild that and to do what they've done before in a good way. So yeah, I think it's not you can't really call it niche anymore.
And is part of that sort of adopting what they call in crypto TradFi practices in the crypto market? Or is it also some very sort of crypto native, crypto specific things that are getting more sophisticated as well?
I mean, it's a mix. I mean, first of all, there are still some misconceptions. People still think crypto equals speculation or things like that. Some people think that in reality, like I said, it's a huge ecosystem with institutional grade participants. You have advanced quantitative strategies. You have robust technology, and yes, as you said, we're all porting that from our previous lives. Most of us, worked either in banks or had their own, business in FX or in equity, etc. So we know what needs to be done. It was a long way, 4 years ago. What I would say is that the technology is advancing at a much faster pace than it has been in any other asset, because precisely we know how to build an exchange, we know how regulation should work, we know how to build trading strategies, we know how to manage inventory, things like that. So yeah, absolutely. And then the access barriers are much lower than people think. So with ETF, as you said, and trusted liquidity provider, you don't necessarily need to touch wallet and private keys anymore. You don't even need to understand the blockchain so you can get exposure to crypto through traditional traditional ways.
Very good. And more of a personal question here, but your big career based in TradFi, you came from FX, proprietary trading background in FX, which I guess is a fairly good proxy for crypto. What drove you to pivot into crypto? And when you look back, do you think you made the right decision?
On a personal level, like you said, I've been in FX for more than 15 years. I've also touched other asset classes. I felt that we got to a stage in TradFi where everything has been done. You can get access to an exchange. You just set a server in a colo, you pay for an API, and you start trading. The trading strategies are well known, the signals are well known. There isn't that much more that people can do. So I feel that in crypto there was everything to build, and that was the fun part. And I think this is why people are moving. First, the market is more volatile. There's more action. There are more participants. It's pretty fixed. Like if you look in equity, there isn't that much happening. Like the biggest exchanges are still the same. Same on FX. Like you don't see any new exchange. You don't see any new big participants. Everything is pretty static. And so I felt that on crypto there was still so much to build. And now we're talking about tokenization and things like that. So it's really an exciting space where everything is happening. And maybe we'll talk about that a bit later. But the other thing that I find fascinating is that you have the crypto enthusiast can really trade on the same exchange as the biggest bank or the biggest institution, and that's never been seen in any kind of asset classes. So it's the idea of building those crypto exchanges was that it was a fair market and it was accessible to everyone in the same way.
Got it. And I guess another big change and maybe challenge is the fact that, what do they say? Crypto never ends. Crypto is always alive. It's 24/7, 365 market. It's never off, no downtime, no weekends, no Christmas, and so on and so forth. How did you deal with that transformation, and how does B2C to ensure that it's always on and able to deliver high performance and good service.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. You don't need to remind us crypto never sleeps, for sure. It's not just a saying, it's our operational reality. So as you said, unlike traditional market where you have trading hours, crypto operate 24/7, 365. There is no market close window. There is no Christmas. Like you said, like it's always open for business. That means there's no downtime. So our systems are always on. It's a globally distributed infrastructure. There's constant monitoring. There's real-time risk and then pricing updates. There's no batch window. Everything needs to be real-time and resilient. So in that respect, the technology you need to build is actually much higher quality than what you've seen before, where you could stop, for example, on FX, 5 Easter, most exchanges stop for a couple of minutes, or on Friday night, it's the exchange stops, it restarts on Sunday night. So you have those kind of 1.5 day to do whatever you want to do. It's very different in crypto. You have to be in the market all the time, and clients expect that as well.
Understood. So I hope you are getting some good night's sleeps there anyway, in between.
Oh yeah, we've got good systems.
So yeah, maybe if we move more into some of the core challenges that you would have experienced, but I think it's still being experienced by many of the large institutions and so on that are coming in. Namely starting at the basics like data. Obviously, your system is only as good as your data, but not necessarily BTC2, but I think general observation from my side, looking at some of the other major market makers or crypto native OTC trading firms and participants in general, they're struggling with data fragmentation, huge volatility in the market. You just mentioned, BTC, Bitcoin just hit 111K, but it may go back down to 70K in 2 weeks. And there's data all over the place and analytics all over the place. Maybe arguably the only real standard, technical standard in crypto today is AWS, as the exchanges are there. But under the hood, if you like, what are many of the challenges that these crypto players are facing, and what are your sort of recommendations for how they should deal with those challenges to move forward?
I mean, you're absolutely right. There's extreme fragmentation in crypto. You have 100+ exchanges, each with different format, API, and quirks. You have mixed data types, so you have on-chain, off-chain, you have derivatives, of course. The social play a big part in that, DX pools, the risk and compliance speed. So you do also get inconsistent quality across exchanges sometimes. Some are more like retail apps, other are more like very professional financial institutions. Some come from FX. So if you can think of a few that come from FX and also created some crypto exchange, so the quality is really high there. So I'd say having clean, real-time, high-frequency data is a serious engineering challenge, and that's what we're aiming for, and I hope that's what we're going to talk about. But just to give the listeners maybe a bit more background, especially those that are not familiar with crypto. So when we say those are examples of fragmented data. So you have on-chain. When we talk about on-chain data, it means raw blockchain data. You have smart contracts, you have staking balances. Then we talk about off-chain, that means like traditional, exchanges with order books, funding rate, open interest. And then the derivatives, similar to other exchanges, you have perpetual futures, you have options, so you need Greeks, you need implied volatility surface. But the thing that's been interesting with crypto as well is the sentiment analysis is very important. So you need, Reddit, Telegram, Twitter. The news are quite important. So, some people have built natural language processing on top of that to get the news quicker and be able to act on that. But you also have some, maybe people know that a bit less. You have some AML tools like chain analysis that will flag addresses that are tainted that you're not supposed to work on. So in that way, it's very transparent. But that also means there's a lot of data to process from very, very, lot of different sources.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Understanding what B2C2 is doing today, and we'll get into it in more detail. But the overall importance of data is the garbage in, garbage out concept. If your data isn't normalized, clean, validated, however good your trading model or AI model is, it's just going to spit out unusual results. So that's one challenge that I'd love to hear you speak a little bit more about, sort of how you do that. Another thing as well, again, a personal observation, within crypto and market making and trading in general, I think there's quite a lot of adoption recently of AI agents or AI bots, let's say, for actual market making, which is a whole kind of new approach versus TradFi, I would argue, and it's not necessarily data heavy. I'd love to hear your views on that trend versus what I would think is more typical and probably the right way to do market making and trading on using a lot of data. So two questions there. Can you talk a little bit more about the importance of the data in your daily, workflow and B2C business, but also how that may differ versus some of your competitors who are using. You may be using AI agents and agents of some sort as well. But what you think of that as a trend and whether it's sustainable?
So first of all, on the data and the normalization, as you mentioned, we absolutely need to normalize timestamps, stick formats. There is a balance between we want to ingest the raw data because we want to be able to understand exactly what happened, but at the same time, you need to standardize the access so you have full usability for machine learning or research. So we do both. We store the raw data and we also store the standardized access for fast quant research and things like that. There is a challenge, like we said, of dealing with unreliable seeds and how to treat the missing data, for example. You also have you also need highly efficient internal messaging because maybe we'll talk about AWS a bit more later, but keep in mind there's like 30 plus AWS regions, so you're getting data from all regions at the same time. There is no co-location like in the old world, where you would host your servers next to an exchange, and exchanges run in the public clouds, which is something very new. I don't think we've seen that anywhere yet, so that's completely new in the space. And then talking about strategies, so we're all used to having low latency strategies that are on-prem HFT environment, so they're very close to the exchange. You can rent a cabinet super close, and that allows you to have the lowest possible latency. In AWS, it's much harder because you don't know exactly where the exchange is. So that's another challenge, and the exchange don't tell you where they are. You can roughly get at exchanges in Tokyo or in Virginia, but you don't know exactly where to put your server to be as fast as possible. So that's another that's another challenge. And then about the part you're talking about, so I don't know if you're talking about automated market makers. Maybe there's something that's more on the DeFi space. So we don't do that. We're more on, so DeFi is still quite it's still quite new for us. We're looking into it, but we're not physically active there at the moment. We're exploring the space because there is a lot of data coming from there. There's a lot of volume, a lot happening, but our current priority is more to serve the clients and to become really prominent on the top crypto exchanges with more I would say more traditional quant type research and strategies.
Got it. Thanks very much, Jad. Really interesting. Also, another observation I think is, there's not one tech standard or approach, if you like, in crypto, and that's one of the exciting things about it, as you mentioned. What I do see is that a lot of trading firms, market makers, are using various bits and pieces adopted from the open source world on the AWS. What do you think about that approach? And I understand it's a very broad question, but so open source versus more established technologies for analytics, for advanced analytics, speed and trading analytics and so on.
Well,
What is your view on
like
that?
like I said, the incredible thing about crypto is that any crypto enthusiast, you could go this weekend and spin a server in AWS in a couple of minutes and start trading on the same exchange as we do, or it's and then liquidity provide the biggest liquidity for us. That's unthinkable in any other asset class. So yes, you have open source tools. You have things like QuestDB, Influx, Timescale. You have Apache Spark-based format. They all have their place, and they all allow you to get going if you want. Um, the challenge is the performance breaks down at scale. So when you start having latency, ingestion throughput, and resilience, that matters. And if you talk about what we were just talking at the moment, the big data application, there is there's not, if you want to do that properly, there's not like a million rows per day, like it's billions. Uh, you have to look at horizontal scaling. So it's not negotiable. So what I would say is, yes, you have a lot of open source tools and they're great to get going, but the engineering cost balloons quickly when you go from pet project to production workload. So that's my observation.
Understood, and maybe honing in a little bit more on the analytics side of things. I mean, there's obviously historical analytics, real-time analytics, somewhere in between. And there's a trend towards more advanced, sophisticated analytics in general. In the crypto world, what do you find are the biggest challenges versus, say, TradFi or other experiences you've had in terms of getting the analytics right and being able to deliver what your customers need and future-proof that as well?
I mean, aside from the data quality that we just mentioned, I'd say that the biggest challenge is probably time alignment across venues. Um, there's something very simple because it's based on the clouds, and the clouds wasn't really built for nanosecond precision. So that means there's no shared clock. NTP is working, but it's not. The precision is not as low as you'd expect. And then PTP for time precision is. I'm not going to say it's not available. It is available, but it's not available on all servers. It has some limitations, etc. So getting the exact time reference right across all regions and all venues, that's a challenge. And then the exchanges themselves have various time precision. And then the other challenge is you need real time and historical access from the same interface. You have to be able to merge the two. So you have to be able to do historical analysis, and then when the real time comes in, you merge the two and you carry on. So having one interface to access both is very important. And then I guess, a bit like everywhere else, you have to balance latency and throughput under pressure, especially during market spikes. You can get a huge amount of data, and you want to be able to process that. So I'd say those are probably the main challenges in the analytics.
That's super interesting. Jad, I think what would be really fascinating to understand as well is, so, we've established the importance of data and the challenges of normalizing, sorting out that data within the crypto trading environment. Once you have that data, what is your sort of day-to-day approach in terms of using that data to then, fuel and drive your models, gain insight, send signals, as you mentioned, drive trading decisions? What is your typical sort of, if there is one, a quantitative approach, both to research and then applying that to a market making use case, let's say? And how, and also I should add, if you could point out how KX is helping you in that process, that would be amazing.
In terms of how we set it up, so the typical quant workflow, if that's what you're asking for, is we have real time feeds that are ingested by feed handler, like in Java, Rust, etc. And they feed into KDB. We have KDB has a ticker plant, which ensures a zero data loss. high frequency capture. And then there is the in-memory storage, which is called the RDB and KDB for real-time for today's data. So that's all in memory. It's super fast. And then the historical data is in HDB, the historical database. And then there's another part that's called the event-driven analysis. That's also another part of KDB. So we use all that, but it's mostly the KX KDB has the right design because, as I said, the ticker plot will ensure really fast consumption of the data, and then we can access it straight away in the RDB, the real-time database, and still know that historical data is in the HDBs. The way we'll probably talk about more the details later, but the way KDB stores the data is also very optimum for what we try to do. So it's more column-based, it's more vector operations in Q, which is KDB language. So that means that the operations are a lot faster than doing some traditional SQL. And then we use that for back testing in research. We validate the strategy, and then it's deployed to prod. And finally, we check that the production and the research match, and there's consistency between them. And then we keep monitoring the performance. I'd say the other thing we use from the KX ecosystem is PyKX. I'm sure we'll talk more about that. It's a mix of Python and Q. So that's more or less our workflow, if you want.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Maybe if we do look a little bit closer at Q, which is obviously the KDB proprietary language. It's optimized for high performance, very efficient, and so on and so forth. But what we've realized as a firm, and I'm sure you get this feedback a lot as well, is that it's not necessarily for all people. Some people find Q difficult. So, as you know, KX has done a lot to open up KDB, the power of KDB, to programmers that don't know Q. It could be SQL, but you just mentioned one of our key tools called PyKX, which allows Python developers to access and query KDB and do analytics. How important has that been to BQC2 in terms of adoption by your typical quant dev, people on your team, and so on?
Well, it's been a game changer because, as you said, Q can be. I think Q is better if you want to get into if you really want to maximize the use of Q. We found that people with mathematical backgrounds find it quite normal because it's very abstract as you're working on vectors, you're working on functions. You can still use it as as SQL. You can still do some selects like in the old worlds. And you're right, there is a SQL interface anyway. So I would say that first, in terms of users, you have the people that are funny enough, we found that the grads coming out of computer science now are very comfortable with Q, even though they've never done it. They found it natural because they do a lot of math and they understand that. Whereas people coming from traditional computer science, computer background, that struggle a bit more in the concept of visualizing vectors, etc. So it really depends. So what I'd say on our side is, if you want to write something very advanced, we usually leave that to very skilled people, whether it's quant researchers or quant devs. And then what we do is we have a common framework that we make accessible to the rest of the plant. So you'd have more traders, analysts, etc., that can use all those very smart functions, and we abstract them for them with very simple interfaces. So what we started doing before KX was building some kind of library that you could kind of call from Python itself. But with PyKX, it becomes a lot easier. So imagine a Jupyter notebook. Most people would know it if they've done a bit of Python, but super fast. So we use you can use Q for heavy data extraction like joins and transforms, and you can use Python for traditional machine learning workflow. And you don't necessarily need to know a lot of Q to do that. As I said, we have a few people that build all the heavy lifting, if you want. The data extraction is standardized, etc. So even someone who just want to focus, if we get a researcher that specializes in in some kind of machine learning, he can come in and get going pretty fast. But the performance is really the key here. So we did a test with as of join. So if people don't know what it is, it's so we have 1 million orders and we have 100 million prices. And for every order, we're trying to find the last timestamp that matches the order. So it's like a join, but based on the closest time as opposed to a perfect join. So anyway, so we did that for 1 million orders and 100 million prices. And on the average hardware in Q with KX, we got about 100 milliseconds to do that. Whereas if we do it in Python alone, it was about 20 seconds. So it's 200 times slower in Python than in Q. So I'd say it combines the best of both worlds. So Python for ease and Q for speed.
So if we move on, I guess, again, in terms of, a quant developer research type environment, would you point out anything within the crypto world which is either different to, say, TradFi in terms of doing quant development, and also, again, a sort of side observation on some of your competitors and other cryptocurrency trading firms? There's quite a lot of chaos under the hood, if you like, in terms of, quants. I don't know if the right term is rogue behavior. I've heard many stories where they've literally pulled down the trading system, by running a very large query at high compute. So how do you manage that sort of complexity with a team, I think, across 3 locations, London, New York, Tokyo? And what are the quirks that you see in terms of crypto quant development?
So there are 2 questions here. Let me start with the last one because it's close to my heart and something I've been witnessing, like you said, with nice word for a very long time. So look, there's a common problem. Like every researcher likes to go away and do their own thing. They do their own research and then run their own Jupyter notebook with build what they believe is a fantastic model. The route to production, though, is very different. So I've seen the stats: 87% of research projects don't make it to prod. First, I thought it was a lot. Then I thought it sounds realistic because it's so easy to go on and just build something. It takes 10 minutes to run a machine learning model. But the reality is the data extraction and normalization have to be standard library functions. Otherwise, you can't even trust that the person has extracted in the right way, has done all the proper evaluation. So, for example, to be very concrete, so if we do in sample, out of sample, if you do cross validation, if you do performance metrics, they cannot be produced by the same person creating the model. It's like me creating a model and then telling you, look, my model is going to make $1 million, and you have no way to check it. So there needs to be a standard framework to evaluate the strategy that ideally can't be run by anyone. So that's back to having a really great framework where everything is standardized and everything is code reviewed, etc. And then I'd say the biggest flaw as well that I've seen, it sounds pretty obvious for a software developer that, code this version that's been there for a while. But for some reason on research, it's not that obvious that the data need to be version 2. So if I run a model, a month ago, then okay, I can go back and look at the code. But the reality is I also need to know what data it was trained on and tested on and evaluated on, because maybe that data has changed. So that need to be versioned as well, and that's less obvious in the quant world. Talk across whole product, right? It's not just not crypto. So it's something we're very cautious about. We have very strong head of research that come from one of the top tier bank, and that really helped us standardize the whole research library in Q, and then provide access in other languages if needed. Now to your second question, specific challenges of crypto research. So I'd say it's non-stationarity. So first of all, forecasting financial time series is already one of the most complex tasks in data science. Like it is extremely hard because it keeps changing all the time. Crypto just add another level of complexity on top of that. So, like you said, many venues have noisy, unreliable data. Keep in mind that crypto, as we know it today, like very professional, it has limited amount of historical data. You can't go back 25 years and, and then finally, I'd say the last challenge that is less obvious maybe for people coming from a different, space is that there is no central reference price like in equities. You don't have the New York Stock Exchange, the Nasdaq, the LSE, and so that means that the mid price, or what we call the fair value, is constructed. It's not given. You can't say this is the reference in the market, that exchange, I'm going to trust it 100%. You can't do that. It keeps changing. So you always have to build your reference if you want.
No, super interesting. I think the next section, it would be great to talk a little bit, Jad, about what BTC2 and yourself have been doing in terms of, in a broad sense, sort of visualization, and specifically using KX dashboards. So I know from our long-standing relationship that you started off using our back-end engine KDB, and then a few years into that journey, you started working with KX dashboards, where previously you'd been working with some of the open source visualization suites, if you like, and BI tools. Could you talk us through that experience with KX dashboards and what it's done for the business at B2C2?
Sure. So we've come a long way, like you said. 4 years ago, most reports were daily. They were static. They were PDF. Sales would get an email with some client data every day, and they'd have to work with that. So when we saw KX dashboard, we liked the fact that it was dynamic and that it was also built on top of KDB. So today it helped us build all kind of analytics, every level. I mean, we have, I don't know, maybe hundreds of dashboards. But what we like is the dynamic components. So you have pivot tables, you have graphs, you have pie charts, you have maps, text, whatever you want. And I think you know better, but it's probably about 35 pre-installed component or something that come directly with KX, with KX dashboards. So yeah, we use them a lot. They're very well appreciated across the firm for sure.
Excellent. If you can move on to another sort of broader topic, I guess I would name it, trading under stress, if you like. And I'm not talking about the trader, him or herself, but the actual system and how robust it is, and how it's able to deal with tremendous swings in the market in recent times, volatility across all markets, of course, but I think far more in crypto, as you noted, but in terms of the Bitcoin movement up and down. How have you dealt with that as a firm, and how has the technology has it stood the test, if you like, of that volatility and surge in volume?
So we went from one quant and one KDB server, as that was maybe 5 years ago, to ingesting about 1.5 maybe terabyte a day today. So we also tried on-prem. So we tried to have the hardware, on-premise, like a physical server to host KDB, but we found that it quickly became obsolete, even before it was delivered. So on that, the cloud wins for speed, flexibility, compliance. Like I still don't understand why so many banks and hedge funds insist on having their data science and research on premises. It's so expensive and inefficient. I mean, that's my personal view, by the way. Either you end up buying a box that is 10 times your current needs, or you have to compromise on data and only save part of it. So upgrading a server in the bank takes 3 to 6 months. In the cloud, it's a 5-minute job. So sorry, that was my view on the the flexibility you have, just being in the cloud, regardless which provider. And then what we found is that like AWS and KX work really well together. That was our observation. So you can use it for high throughput because AWS is really good at providing hardware, and then KX is very good at providing the data tools, the database, all the tools around that. So you still need to rely on very solid infrastructure. So we found that for to be able to do full tick replace, for example, at high speed data extraction, things like that, we use something that's called the AWS FSx Luster, which is a near infinite horizontal storage scaling. So I mean, for our technical and non-technical, listeners, I'd say under the hood, imagine that AWS connects many servers with very fast disk compute and cache, and it allows no downtime and transparent file system. It's like having a huge network drive that handles all the compression and all that, all the resiliency, which means KDB database itself can fully focus on use all the CPU cycles for real-time data crunching and in real tasks. So we found that very powerful. The other thing that allowed us to do is to spin some sandbox, which we love to do in the research quant space. So we have lots of unique database environment if you want, but they're pointing to the same files. So back to the point you were mentioning earlier, research doesn't impact frauds, obviously, but that's one of the nice setup you can have by separating the data itself and how you access it and how you compute it.
And how do you leverage it in the real time trading world in crypto? The fact that I think it's fair to say that KDB has a very small software footprint, which has a related situation whereby the hardware footprint is very small. Now, how have you used that to your advantage, and how does that sort of compare to some other systems or customers that you're aware of?
So I come from the HFT background. I know a lot of people in that space, and for the top funds, having a proper research environment could mean buying thousands of bare metal servers in Iceland. Iceland, just so it cools, pay less for electricity, but still, it's like $300 million budget. It's enormous. In comparison, we achieve some very good throughput with a fraction of that hardware. We have maybe 10 servers or less. And we're able to ingest and compute a tremendous amount of data. So yeah, I'd say in terms of there's also the horizontal scaling. So we're also very good at that. Like AWS told us at some point, look guys, you're using the biggest available box in AWS. It's time to think horizontally, and that unlocked a lot of new possibilities. But that means we're very flexible with either growing or reducing the size of our servers, if you want. But yes, it's pretty efficient, and we've seen it through some real world stress tests. We're quite lucky in crypto to have a few of those. So we saw elections, market crashes. We saw exchanges or coins that disappear overnight. It was boringly smooth, I would say, in terms of infrastructure, which boring is good in infrastructure. It was quite resilient to all of those events.
Excellent. Thanks very much for those comments. So I think we're getting close to wrapping up, but before we do, it would be great to get your take on some of the trends that are emerging in crypto now. The new exciting things that you're looking at, working on. Obviously, everyone's talking about AI, generative AI. More sophisticated analytics, prediction. There's a stack of stuff. You mentioned DeFi as well, but what do you think are going to be the big disruptive technologies going forward from here, Jed?
Well, I think there are a few pieces on AI, and I think unfortunately for many, AI is still a buzzword, and there's a bit of FOMO going on between companies and users, if I'm very honest. And I talk to people who say we need to do AI, and they don't really know what it means. We have a very clear roadmap on that, and we just hired an experienced AI team. So for me, the biggest categories are, say, LLM, Gen AI, if you want, the large language model. So this is about text, so it helps compliance, risk, HR, sales. They help us in their daily job because it analyzes a huge amount of data, summarizes it, provides guidance, sentiment analysis. That's already in place, and it's proven very helpful. I doubt that's specific to crypto. I think everyone is looking at that, but that's very helpful, and it leverages the skills we have in the company. Then the second part is machine learning, and that's been there for years now. That's about finding the best model to predict something, to predict some market elements, ideally better than a linear regression. It's mostly numerical. It uses conjunction with other traditional mathematics and data science, for example, to build, a trading signal or some specific alpha. And then the third one that we use as well a lot is the AI coding assistant. So we found that everyone has their favorite. I quite like Microsoft Copilot, but it's personal preference. That's also fine. That it also helps the dev team to build quicker. So we also work with KX. I know that we have a few initiatives going on trying to embed the scikit-learn models in KX. We're looking at vector database with KDB AI for instructor data, and bringing together maybe AI notebooks for PyKX and Jupyter. So I know we're looking at those things. In terms of Gen AI itself, I think when you talk about Gen AI, it means new and original content. It's not just analyzing the data. I think it's maybe too early for mission critical, but we know that chatbots like Coinbase, for example, using for customer service to provide a quick response to customers with accurate account information. Funny enough, on the blockchain, you have, because the blockchain is immutable, you can combine it with Gen AI to trace the origin of digital assets and then potentially protect intellectual property, for example. So that's one example where you can imagine using that.
And as you mentioned, the AI, in a very broad sense, and machine learning, it's been around for many, many years. And obviously, there are a lot of new things like Gen AI that many people are trying to still realize value from. We're quite early on in that journey. But do you have any sort of fundamental recommendations around, leveraging AI in terms of, the process that you would you have around your AI models and the must-haves or gotchas that you've learned over the years?
Yes, I'd say if you ask me, I think what people get wrong about AI is very similar to what they get wrong about general modeling and algo building. It's when they're trying to do AI, they get often dazzled by the model itself. They skip the hard stuff, the data hygiene, pipeline validation, reproducibility. Like I said, it takes 10 minutes to use an AI model, especially these days. There's a lot of rich libraries, and API access from AWS, ChatGPT, whatever, Google, you name it. This part is quite mature actually. It's less fun, and no one wants to do it. It is hydrating the data, writing performance metrics, proper serving and deployment. It's hard to deploy a model to production. It's very easy to come up with something in a couple of minutes. And then you need to monitor the data and model bias. So you need to know if your data is changing over time, but you also know if your model if the behavior of your model is changing over time, because something that works today might not work tomorrow. So you still need to build all that infrastructure around that. Some people summarize by MLOps, and MLOps culture as comparison to DevOps. I think it's critical for any serious AI initiative. You got to treat it as a whole ecosystem. It's not just I'm buying this piece of software, I'm running it, and it's all good. And then, like I mentioned, the versioning and iterative cycle, that's also key in the AI world.
Thanks for that, Jed. I think we're coming up to time right now, but I guess the multi-billion Bitcoin question. Given your experiences and where BTC2 is heading, I think there's a lot of firms that are competitors or wannabes that are trying to replicate what you guys have done. As part of that challenge or journey, is there any sort of golden nugget of advice that you would give firms that are trying to build sophisticated data and trading analytics stacks today?
I would say don't over-engineer from day one. Start with something that works and scale what proves variable. Maybe focus on high quality, time-aligned data is very important, and build standardized workflow early. But choose the right technology for the job. And finally, let's say if you apply those, then you'll save countless hours and dollars down the line. That'd be my advice.
So I think we're going to have to end here. Fascinating discussion, Jed. Thank you very much for your time and your insights. Really, really appreciate it. I certainly learned a lot. I hope the listeners did as well. And on that point, please do come back, listeners, for our future podcasts. We also have a bunch of existing content online, so feel free to check it out. Thank you very much.